We are very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning Greg Miller. Greg Miller is a former U.S. Army infantryman who served in Iraq and is a member of Coffee Strong, a veteran-owned and operated GI coffee house located down in Lakewood, Washington. So start out, tell us about what was your motivation in joining the military?
Okay. Well, I joined the military back in 2008. I lived in a small town in northeastern Pennsylvania, and at the time, I was 30 years old when I joined the Army, and I guess at the time, growing up in Northeast PA, I guess I could say the economy had been pretty bad there, kind of long before it hit nationally, and a lot of people worked in factories and things like that. I mean, it was a very blue collar area. I ended up kind of finding myself only having a high school diploma, not really a lot of job options, and I was just really kind of in and out of work. Things were pretty tough. I didn't really have a way to get out of the area. I hadn't gone to college, you know what I mean? I really kind of felt stuck. But I found myself kind of faced with the choice of, looking at that as more my future, or I kind of revisited the idea of joining the military, which is something I've been interested in since I was a kid. The recruiters would come to school. It all seemed really cool, but it never seemed like something I would actually go ahead and do. But at that point, I kind of revisited that idea in more of a serious way. What could this do to get me out of here and get me on a track to be able to go to college? Things like that. So, at the time, I felt like I was pretty up on the issues, but I guess really in retrospect, I was pretty naive. I thought in joining the military, not only would I be able to, go to college, but I figured I'd probably be doing something good. I'd be helping out, you know what I mean? I really had no understanding of everything that went into the history of, America and the Middle East and stuff like that. And I just figured anybody that wanted to, very naively figured anybody that, wanted to pick a fight with us probably wasn't good. So I figured I'd be killing two birds. I'd be able to go help some people out, do something I'd always wanted to do, and go to college at the same time.
And did you anticipate that you would be going to Iraq when you joined?
Of course. I think everybody, the deployment cycle was so frequent at that time, especially everybody knew, even your recruiter told you, hey, you're going to go to Iraq or Afghanistan. So, it was something that I was looking forward to doing. Again, at the time I thought it was something good. It was something that needed to be done. So yeah, I joined knowing that I would end up going over there.
All right. So when did you start having second thoughts about your new career?
I think my approach to it at the time was I was going to join and I was going to kind of feel it out. I initially enlisted for 3 years, and I figured, well, I'd get there, I'd see how it was, and make a decision if I wanted to, stay for 20 years and retire. So I started basic training in November of 2008, and I came to Fort Lewis in, I believe it was March or April of 2009. And it really didn't take me too long there to really get a feel for what the Army was like. I think part of what led me to join the Army was I felt very dissatisfied with jobs I'd had previously. I really felt like I had a strong sense of integrity, doing the right thing, being squared away. And it always seemed like those were not the qualities that got you ahead in any sort of other job I had. I always felt like I was working for people that I couldn't figure out how they ever got to be put in charge. And I figured, kind of frustrated with that and the other stuff I mentioned, I was like, if there's one place where doing the right thing and being squared away definitely will benefit you and get you ahead, it's got to be the military. So I was looking forward to that. I kind of bought into, the Army values as they were, honor, integrity, all that stuff, which is something that is still important to me now, even though it turned out I didn't find that in the military. It really probably only took me a couple months to really get my bearings and realize that it was like the 13th grade. It was just like a high school bully culture with no boundaries. I mean, it started pretty early on. It would be like 3 o'clock in the morning, and your 23-year-old team leader would come in drunk and pull you out of your room and have you doing push-ups and everything out in the hallway till you threw up and cleaning it up with your shirt. In your off time, they're just drunk. This is just for their own amusement. And that was one of the first things that kind of turned me on to what it was actually like there. I certainly expected it to be rigorous, in a military way, but there was a lot of nonsense outside of that really had a big impact on your life. It really just made your life hell, and it was really just for someone else's amusement. So that really kind of got me. That was probably the first sort of warnings I had that, this wasn't as advertised.
And then when did you end up going to Iraq itself?
About 6 months later. As soon as I showed up at Fort Lewis, they were already well into the cycle of preparing to deploy. We were wrapping up the training end of it, and then you go into a few-month period of literally just inventorying everything that you have and, preparing to deploy. So I found myself in Iraq about 6 months after that. And already by that time, having decided, I'm just going to do my 3 years. I'm going to get out and go to college. I got to Iraq, and it really, again, didn't take me very long once I got there to just realize, I think, what the truth about what we were doing there was, the truth about what had happened prior to my arrival in those years was. It was really surprising, just realizing and kind of having it hit me really early on in my year-long deployment that we had destroyed that place. It was very disheartening, not only having seen the true character of what I thought was, the top of the military, the infantry, supposed to be better than everybody else, more professional, all that stuff. And really, really getting an idea of what the true character of the military, the Army was. And then to go on to see the reality of what I was doing and what I was part of, what I was furthering. And that was just, we were just harming people that we had no reason to be harming, that were not a threat to us. And basically we were making their life hell.
So by the time you got there, the bulk of, at least from our perception here in the U.S., the bulk of the combat was over. It was basically peacekeeping at that time. What would a typical day be like there?
Well, on our deployment, I didn't realize this at the time, but towards the end we were told that we were the last, they called it the last combat brigade in Iraq. So that was the last year of Operation Iraqi Freedom, where it was supposed to be, full spectrum warfare, whatever that entails. And then after we left, that was that big exit that was on. It was pretty widely publicized. It was just, long lines of strikers driving down the highway in Iraq and out through into Kuwait, and then it became Operation New Dawn. So what a typical day would look like there, it kind of varied. We usually went on one or two combat missions or patrols every day. We're also involved in trying to train the Iraqi army and do things like that. Every day, I don't know, it was kind of like Groundhog's Day. You wake up at some very random hour, go out, walk around, drive around, try not to, hope you don't get blown up, that sort of thing, or go try to, sometimes we would cordon off the whole city, just literally form a boundary around it with our strikers while the Iraqi army emptied every citizen from the city, had them report to some other location, and they would just question those people, search every single house in the entire city of 150,000 people. This would take all day. It would be from before the sun came up to the time the sun went down. It seemed like a very oppressive style of governance. So it was just kind of some mix of that. It was very disappointing, I guess, just to see that. I realized that it seemed like nobody I worked with was able to even look at Iraqis as people in any sense. You know what I mean? It was just very, I don't know, they just looked at them as subhuman, and that really translated into the way that we treated them. And I guess so early on, I mean, just realizing all these things, the nature of what I was doing there and what I was part of and what the people around me were like was a real letdown. I felt like I didn't see any of those Army values I had kind of come there seeking, and unfortunately it kind of felt like Serpico, you know what I mean? I felt like I was one of the only people I felt like that was trying to do the right thing, and unfortunately that turned out to really not be the culture to try to have any sort of moral compass in. And so I was just absolutely disgusted with it. And then I had basically an entire year ahead of me already, being in that frame of mind, like, I can't believe what I'm doing here. You know what I mean? So it was a long year. It was very disheartening. I just counted down every day until I could leave that place. And I still had about another 2.5 years in the Army from the time that I got there. So it was a long time.
So how would you deal with that on a daily basis? It's obviously, you said that you felt like Serpico, which means there's really no one else there that you can talk to. Could you find any other allies in your beliefs?
It really wasn't something that somebody talked about. And what was talked about was kind of the opposing viewpoint, like just basically it's just always racist nicknames, racist talk, violent, aggressive talk, stuff like that. So, and especially I was only a private at the time, so I just kind of kept my mouth shut. It's very isolating to have a completely different point of view than everyone around you in such a violent circumstance and culture. I just kind of kept it to myself, and it just really felt like, in the same way, in that movie, the guy that's trying to do the right thing finds himself on the receiving end of, the heat from all his peers, and, always finds himself, getting in trouble with the department, stuff like that. It just really felt like swimming upstream. And so I just kind of tried to keep it together. I was really concerned about my discharge, even though it was a couple years away. I really, after a while, just kind of trying to keep this in. It was just like, is this even real? Is this really happening to me? I cannot believe I'm here right now, feeling this way, being stuck here. It was extremely frustrating. I really felt like I was going crazy. I mean, by the end of the deployment, I felt like I didn't sleep. I would just stay up all night. I would literally wander around the base wondering if I was going crazy. And do you realize when you've gone crazy? And once you have, is there any way to come back from it? I mean, it was literally, I felt like it was driving me insane, trying to keep everything bottled up, trying not to act up or act out, not having to go to my chain of command and saying, like, this is disgusting. I just cannot be part of this anymore. Because, I figured if I did not come out of this on the other end, being able to accomplish my goal of going to college and move on with my life, I couldn't take that idea.
Were there any outside resources that you could use during this time? Like, let's say family, just talking to family, that would help?
I mean, I was able to, talk to my family on the phone sometimes and stuff, and I had tried broaching these subjects a bit, with my parents, who were really like the only people I had to talk to outside of, as far as who knew me well enough to try to talk to about something delicate like that. But I don't really feel like they understood, and I would try to feel it out and bring it up a little bit with them, but I'm not sure if they wanted to hear it either. So, not really. No, nobody.
And do you feel like the attitudes of everyone around you was instilled from a top-down Army type attitude, or is this just something people came into the Army with, or a combo of both?
I think it's definitely a little bit of both. Kind of the way that, like much in the way that I came to the Army, believing a lot of naive, ignorant stuff, that there was a bunch of people in the Middle East that just wanted to, harm America, harm Americans, not really having any sense of politics or the world around me, I have no excuse. I was old at the time, but especially coming there 18, 19, you don't know anything about anything. So, you believe what you're told, you kind of assimilate to the culture that's around you. So I feel like there were a lot of people with a lot of ignorant beliefs that were really solidified by this indoctrination, the intentional and the inherent aspects of that. that the military puts you through, where they, really dehumanize you and they dehumanize everybody else, but specifically whatever your enemy is at that time. And all the training that I had before going to Iraq and all the training that I had after, we were always fighting Muslims. They may have been from Mexico, here, wherever, around the world, these different training scenarios, wherever they were supposed to be from, they were Muslims. And it's just a very reinforced concept that these people are not human, and that, they're just, it's really very simple, that they're not human, and they have to do that to you, because, there's no way you can look at someone as another human being and then harm them when they're not threatening you. So I think it was, they came with a lack of understanding and a willingness to, I really feel like it satisfied their self-esteem in some way to be this, aggressive defender of America. And I don't know, it just seemed like everybody bought into it except for me. Good.
All right, so once you knew that you were leaving the Army, was there, and you went through this long waiting period, how soon after you got out of Iraq before you got to get out of the Army?
I had a year and a half left after we came home from Iraq. And, I guess even while I was there, I realized something was wrong. Something really did not sit right. My understanding of what we were there to do and what we were doing didn't match up with what I was seeing, but I was just having such an awful time there that I didn't really have very much free time, and I didn't really have very much free mental ability left to really look into what we were doing, kind of like what really did lead up to the war in Iraq. What were we really doing, And when I came home, I found I had a little more free time, and I really became obsessed with, the politics and the events, what led up to us going to Iraq. And, that was all very overwhelming to me. Coming back was very overwhelming too, just trying to, live with my wife and be part of, this world, but also really learning, what a sucker I was and what a sucker I think many people were. So it made me feel even worse about what I had done. And it really just made that year and a half ahead of me look like it may as well have been forever. It was very tough. I absolutely loathed what I was a part of, in every way, even now, at that time, I should say, being home, stateside Army. I hated it. I hated everything it stood for. I, really just started having a lot of troubles. I had a lot of, like I said, problems. I just was really, really mentally unwell at the time, and was just having a real hard time with that. And it took me probably about 6 months before I felt like I was not able to keep it together anymore. I wasn't able to kind of control the way I was feeling on my own. I was just having a really hard time with what happened in Iraq and what, again, just going back to it, just the truth of what I was part of and just being part of that culture. I just absolutely couldn't stand it anymore. And I felt like I was just on the verge of doing something just that seemed kind of crazy to me. And I knew that that's not the sort of person that I was. And that's, I had lived for 30 years prior to joining the Army, and I knew that the person I was in, late 2010, early 2011 was not the person that I used to be. And I kept hearing that there were people that I could talk to about it. The Army kept pushing that on us. If you feel like you're having troubles, if you feel like it's really getting overwhelming, talk to your chain of command, talk to the chaplain, or go see a mental health provider. And so I finally started looking into that. I didn't tell anybody. I self-referred, and I went to a place called Soldier Readiness Service, and started going through this mental health process at Fort Lewis. And for some other things, I wasn't able to sleep. I slept about 2 hours or less a night, and I'd been doing that for close to a year. And I started finding that these processes were just they were just a complete failure. The first one was a sleep clinic that I was supposed to go to, and between that and the mental health place, it seemed like everywhere you went, you sat down in front of someone who looked at you like something they learned about in college, and really had no attempt at a personal connection to personally understand what your issue was and how they could use their training and their experience to kind of help you sort your mind out. It really kind of reminded me of, it was facilitated in the way that kind of reminds me of, if you call technical support. That person might not be an expert on that device, but they have some advice from their company that they're trained to pass along to you. And it really seemed to be, I seem to find myself getting a lot of trifold brochures that said things like, well, if you can't sleep, don't drink a whole pot of coffee before you go to bed. And I was up with nightmares and sleeping like 1.5 hours, 2 hours a night, and I was just well beyond the standard issue help that they had to give. And it felt like everywhere I went, this was the kind of help I was receiving, and I felt like my problems were getting worse. I felt like this process was extremely frustrating. It was extremely insulting, I felt, and I felt like I was doing the things the Army told me to. I had gone to soldier readiness service. I tried having conversations with the chaplain. I tried bringing it up with my chain of command, and things were only getting worse. And I felt like the only thing keeping me hanging on was that I was married, and I really couldn't stomach the thought of doing something that would ultimately leave my wife hurt by it. And I could even feel that link was, the strength of that was thinning on me. So I ended up becoming aware of Coffee Strong, which is right outside the Madigan Gate of Fort Lewis. And I didn't know too much about it. I knew it was a place, it was a coffee shop. I knew it was run by some veterans, and supposedly they helped soldiers. I heard a lot of things about it. There's a lot of bad information, a lot of misinformation that goes around about what Coffee Strong is. People use all kinds of slurs like hippies, things like that at the time, which are in the Army. That's a very powerful word, But I figured, you know what, whatever. I'm literally, at the end of what I can take, and I'm willing to try anything. So I ended up walking in there one day, and after having gone through months and months of just starting from the moment, literally like the first day back at the Army, from when I came home from Iraq, they give you like 48 hours off, and then you come back into the Army, and then you spend an entire day, a couple days, just processing back into the Army, this big warehouse type building, going to all these different stations, standing in lines, people sitting at desks. They ask you all kinds of questions, you fill out all kinds of things. And I felt like even just within that building, I probably told my life story to about 12 different people, and just trying to be like, are you the person that can help me? And then it would come down to it. Well, no, I'm just the person that sets the appointment for 3 months from now. And that was pretty much what I felt like that process was for all of those months, from the time I got back till the day I walked into Coffee Strong, was pouring my heart out to these people and having people, tell me to call this number if I feel like killing myself. And it was just a really frustrating, insulting process. And, I was so tired of having to explain myself from square one all the way through, the current time to all these different people. It really takes a lot to do that. And just really being let down by everyone that you talk to. No one will listen to you. It's, not to get too off track, but it's really an interesting kind of system. Because realizing now, after the fact, looking back, I don't know of another, psychologist or mental health provider who you can go to for some sort of trauma, or say you'd like to kill yourself, and their goal is to send you back to the source of your trauma, anywhere except the military. You know what I mean? If you were a child that was being abused or raped by, an adult, you wouldn't go to a therapist who would try to help you gain some resiliency to go back and continue to be traumatized, And it just seemed like a concept that they couldn't understand, that I would be that at odds with myself over what I was part of and what I was doing, and that there was nothing that they could tell me that was going to get me to go back and continue to, serve my purpose. But at any rate, just basically about to give up, I walked into Coffee Strong one day, and, part of the problem of trying to explain yourself to these folks in the Army, going back real quick, is that if you can't convince them that you have a problem, you don't have a problem. So it's really this game of trying to like sound crazy enough without sounding too crazy, and that, you know, it just never seems to work. So I walked into Coffee Strong, and there was a guy sitting at this table who appeared to be working there, and I sat down and started talking to him, and I really didn't get very far into my story at all. And he said, "Man, I understand. I was in the infantry too," and that was just probably one of the most relieving moments of my entire life, just to know that I didn't have to convince this guy that I was crazy. I didn't have to try to articulate my experiences to him, because he had been in Iraq, as it turns out, you know, at a much worse time than I had. So I mean, like, he, you know, that was a really great thing to have found, you know. And so I just really started talking to this guy, and he understood. And then I discovered, you know, the work that they were doing there, and what the purpose of Coffee Strong was, and just really being a place where soldiers or vets, but especially, you know, active duty people, can just walk in the door and speak the truth about, you know, what it really is like to serve in the military, and what it really is like, you know, what the truth is, you know, about going to Iraq. And I had to go all the way to Iraq to learn what the word imperialism meant, but now I finally had a place where I could talk to other people who had been through these same experiences and come out in a very similar way, you know. Whereas over at Fort Lewis, when I was at work, I felt like I was the only one, you know. I never heard anybody saying anything like I thought, you know. And I think part of what was so troubling for me after I came back from Iraq was I really, you know, had this question, you know, just really questioning the way I felt. I was like, man, I signed up for this. You know, I can't believe that this is how I feel about what I'm doing, you know. And it was very troubling. I just really felt like I wasn't living up to some expectation I had for myself or something. And really coming to find that here's all these other intelligent, articulate people who've done the same thing and come out saying the same thing. They saw the same truths, and they've come to the same conclusion. And it was just such a weight off me to know that I wasn't crazy for thinking the things that I had, and that really realizing that I had signed up for something else entirely. You know what I mean? I didn't sign up to go harm people who were not a threat to my country. You know, I had no problem with what my job was. I had no problem with doing my job, but there's a big difference to me in the motivation behind it. You know what I mean? We were just bullying those people, and they were dying. And so getting turned on to what was going on at Coffee Strong was really something I really do believe that it saved my life. It was really interesting to have, you know, I kind of felt like, you know, when I got to Iraq, it kind of felt to me like my entire system of belief and understanding the world had been torn from me, you know. And it was a very empty, very, very distressing time to really not have some sort of, you know, I don't know, just to have kind of your beliefs kicked out from under you and nothing to take its place, you know. And part of what was so beneficial of going into Coffee Strong for me was that, you know, I felt like I had a new community of people with a new way of viewing the world and understanding it that matched what I felt. And I felt like that really took the place of that for me. And I feel like for all the help the Army, you know, I use that word in quotes, that they say that there is for you, what helped me out the most was really just realizing that I was not crazy, that I was not wrong. And that really helped me reconcile everything that had happened to me in the military and in Iraq, understanding it in the context of, yes, I was used to perpetrate, you know, these greedy ends, you know, and then I wasn't defending the country. I wasn't defending freedom or anything like that. So that really kind of helped put that in perspective for me. And then, so I kind of, at the time, surreptitiously became involved with Coffee Strong and Iraq Veterans Against the War, and was interested in the work that they were doing, providing services to soldiers and veterans, all kinds of stuff. I mean, literally a person could walk in there with pretty much any sort of problem. I mean, it seems like soldiers and vets always seem to have the same kind of problems, and that's something, you know, that I've discovered is, yeah, we're all unique, our stories are all different, but we all kind of come to the same conclusions with the same problems. And, you know, you really don't even have to, it kind of like, I guess I imagine it kind of like the guy that I talked to when I went into Coffee Strong. Man, I understand, I was in the infantry. It's like, I was very glad, you know, in my time working over the summer, I volunteered full time pretty much with IVAW and Coffee Strong, and I was really glad to be able to be on the receiving end of that. You know what I mean? To be behind the counter making coffee and have someone come in, and I could tell that there was just something heavy on their mind that they weren't saying. And it's like, hey, can I get you something? Hey, yeah, I feel like killing myself. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it's that simple, and you get these vets walking in that just lay it all out there for you, and they feel like they can trust you. And I'm really glad that I'm now able to be there for other people who are me, you know, just a little while ago.
Well, I want to thank you very much for coming in and spending time with us this morning.
Sure. Thanks for having me on.